The events depicted in this video are based on real incidents. The script has been created for educational and entertainment purposes only. The safety of passengers and crew members is of the utmost importance.
Hello, and welcome to Air Crash Chronicles, the channel that explores the mysteries behind some of the biggest air disasters in history.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
British Airways Flight 009, also known as Speedbird 9 or the Jakarta incident, was a scheduled flight from London Heathrow to Auckland with stopovers. On June 24, 1982, the City of Edinburgh, a Boeing 747-200 registered as G-BDXH, was flying the route. While flying near Jakarta, Indonesia, the aircraft encountered a cloud of volcanic ash from the eruption of Mount Galunggung, causing all 4 engines to fail. Due to the darkness, the crew and air traffic control were initially unaware of the cause of the failure. The aircraft was redirected to Jakarta in hopes of restarting enough engines to safely land. After gliding out of the ash cloud, all engines were restarted, although one failed again shortly after, and the aircraft successfully landed at Jakarta's Halim Perdanakusuma airport. The crew members involved in the incident had boarded in Kuala Lumpur, while many passengers had been on the flight since departing from London. During the incident, the flight crew of BA009 consisted of 3 members: Senior First Officer Roger Greaves, Senior Engineer Officer Barry Townley Freeman, and Captain Eric Henry Moody. They had boarded the aircraft in Kuala Lumpur and were scheduled to fly the 747 to Perth Airport. Around 1340 UTC, while Moody was heading to the lavatory, the crew noticed an unusual effect on the windscreen resembling St. Elmo's fire. Despite clear skies shown on the weather radar, they turned on engine anti-ice and passenger seatbelt signs as a precaution. As the flight continued, smoke began to fill the cabin, initially assumed to be from cigarettes but soon growing thicker with a sulfur odor. Passengers noticed the engines emitting an unusually bright blue light with a stroboscopic effect. At 1342 UTC, the number 4 engine experienced surging and flamed out, followed within seconds by engines 2, 1, and 3. The flight crew immediately performed the engine shutdown drill, cutting off fuel supply and activating fire extinguishers. Realizing they had lost all engine thrust, they determined that the aircraft could glide for 23 minutes and cover 91 nautical miles from its altitude of 37,000 feet. At 1344 UTC, Greaves declared an emergency.
Jakarta Control, Speedbird 9, we have lost all 4 engines. Repeat, all 4 engines.
But air traffic control initially misunderstood the message. Passengers, fearing for their lives, wrote notes to their loved ones. To ensure a safe crossing of the coast, an altitude of at least 11,500 feet was needed due to the high mountains in Indonesia. If they couldn't maintain altitude by 12,000 feet, they planned to turn back to sea and attempt a water landing. The crew attempted engine restarts but were outside the recommended altitude for in-flight start. Despite the lack of time, Moody made a calm announcement to the passengers about the situation. As cabin pressure dropped, oxygen masks were deployed, though Greaves's mask was broken. Moody decided to descend rapidly to an altitude where there was enough pressure for breathing. At an altitude of 13,500 feet, the crew faced the possibility of ditching in the ocean if they couldn't maintain altitude. They attempted to restart the engines, with engine number 4 finally starting and helping to reduce the descent rate. Engine 3 also restarted, allowing for a slow climb, followed by the successful restart of engines 1 and 2. The crew requested a higher altitude to clear the mountains in Indonesia. However, as they reached their target altitude, the St. Elmo's fire effect returned, and engine number 2 surged again and had to be shut down. They descended and held at 12,000 feet. As they approached Jakarta's airport, visibility through the windscreen was poor, and they relied heavily on instruments. The crew had to use lateral guidance and a makeshift glide slope to make their approach. The landing lights on the aircraft appeared to be inoperable, and the windscreen was heavily sandblasted, making taxiing difficult due to glare from apron floodlights. The investigation conducted after the flight revealed that the issues experienced by the City of Edinburgh were caused by flying through a cloud of volcanic ash from the eruption of Mount Galunggung. This ash cloud, being dry in nature, was not detectable on the aircraft's weather radar. which was designed to identify moisture in clouds. The dust particles in the cloud deprived the engines of the necessary oxygen from the atmosphere, leading to a loss of combustion. Additionally, the ash caused damage by sandblasting the windscreen and covers of the landing lights, and it also clogged the engines. As the ash entered the engines, it melted within the combustion chambers and stuck to the internal components of the engines. During the period of engine inactivity, as the aircraft descended out of the ash cloud, the molten ash solidified, causing a disruption in airflow. However, enough of the solidified ash broke off when the engine cooled, allowing air to flow smoothly through the engine and facilitating a successful restart. Despite the loss of engine power, the engine still had enough electrical power to initiate the necessary processes for restarting. This was possible because one generator and the onboard batteries were still operational. Following the incident, engines 1, 2, and 3 were replaced, along with the windscreen, and the fuel tanks were cleared of ash contamination. Additional major repairs were done on the aircraft in order to restore it to service. The airspace around Mount Galunggung was temporarily closed, but later reopened. It was only after another incident involving a Singapore Airlines flight that the airspace was permanently closed, and flight routes were diverted to avoid the area. The crew received accolades for their actions, including awards and medals. One of the passengers, Betty Totel, wrote a book about the accident and was able to track down many of the other passengers on the flight. She eventually married another passenger, James Ferguson. British Airways continued to operate the Flight 009 route, but it was later shortened to Bangkok. The aircraft involved in the incident, G-BDXH, continued flying for British Airways before being sold to another company. Eventually, the aircraft was decommissioned and dismantled in 2009. The incident of Flight 009 has been featured in various forms of popular media. The television series Mayday, aired on Discovery Channel Canada and National Geographic, dedicated an episode titled Falling from the Sky to the flight. The episode includes interviews with the flight crew and passengers, as well as a dramatization of the event. Additionally, a similar situation inspired by Flight 009 was depicted in the first episode of the Chinese drama series, The Centimeter of Love, which aired in 2020. On December 20th, 1989, KLM Flight 867, a Boeing 747-400, was en route from Amsterdam to Tokyo, with a scheduled stop in Anchorage, Alaska. However, the flight encountered a potentially catastrophic incident during its approach to Anchorage. Remarkably, a nearly identical incident had occurred to another Boeing 747 in Alaska just a month earlier. As the plane descended towards Anchorage, the volcanic ash cloud from the erupting Mount Redoubt volcano enveloped the aircraft. Unbeknownst to the pilots, they were entering a highly hazardous area filled with volcanic ash particles. Due to their microscopic size and high concentration, these particles can cause serious damage to an aircraft's engines and other crucial systems. At first, the pilots noticed a grayish haze around the airplane, but they presumed it was just a typical cloudy Alaskan sky. However, as they continued their approach, they started experiencing issues. The engines began to lose power, and the cockpit filled with the smell of sulfur, indicating an imminent threat. Captain Van Zanten, the pilot in command and a seasoned veteran, recognized the seriousness of the situation and immediately declared an emergency. Struggling with severely impaired engine performance, the aircraft remained airborne, but it began losing altitude. The crew initiated a diversion and decided to land at the nearby military base, the Elmendorf Air Force Base. During this tense period, the engines trudged on with drastically reduced power, and the crew meticulously followed emergency procedures to maintain control of the aircraft. In a stroke of luck, moments before the plane reached a critical altitude, the engines partially recovered, allowing the crew to regain control and stabilize their descent. They managed to land the aircraft safely at the Elmendorf Air Force Base, where it came to a stop on the runway. Despite enduring a harrowing experience, all 231 passengers and crew members on board KLM Flight 867 survived without any major injuries. These incidents highlighted the dangers posed by volcanic ash clouds to aviation and led to new guidelines and improved safety measures to avoid such hazards.